Hello, fifth graders, and welcome to your language arts lesson for today. Sorry, I had a timer just go off. You will need your poetry book, as usual, maybe definitely a dictionary, but the form in which it takes could be online or physical, and then paper, pencil, if you are writing down answers as we go. Although a lot of you are probably working along with me on the form itself, which is great. So first thing we're going to do, fifth graders, is take a look at those all the world's a stage questions. So we went through a lot of them together. But I also kind of send you on your way to do some by yourself. So let's take a look at that first. So number one, we have the poem's title is All the World's a Stage. And of course, remember we're restating the question, but also remember this formatting thing that we are putting quotation marks around just the poem title, not the entire sentence, but just the poem title. Noting that in this case, it's not technically a poem title, but the first line of this monologue. So we would only capitalize that first word, which is a little different than our usual capitalization rules for poetry. Two, who is the poem's author? We'd say the poem's author is William Shakespeare. Three, woeful means unhappy. Okay, you're woeful or unhappy. That's it. Four, sans. This is that Latin word, and it means without. And so it's kind of important for understanding how the end of the poem goes. Okay. Five, what is the poem's rhyme scheme? This would be time where we'd say there is no rhyme scheme, right? And again, this is a monologue from a play, so far less likely to be rhyme scheme. Okay, how many stages does Shakespeare describe? He describes 7. Okay. So there are 2 metaphors, and so what is one of those metaphors? So one of those metaphors is all the world's a stage. The other one is all the men and women merely players. And I defined players for you in the instructions, and so that means actors, right? So he says, the world is a stage, men and women are actors. And so why is it an example of a metaphor? We set it up yesterday. It is an example of a metaphor because it compares the world to a stage or humans to actors, which is not literally true. Okay, so we want to explain that metaphor. We went through 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 together. So for homework, what is the 4th stage? You would say the name of the 4th stage is the soldier. Lots happening with the description of the quotes. So we're kind of seeing strange oaths and bearded like the pard. So it's describing that at this age, the soldier starts to grow beards, kind of like a leopard, full of strange oaths, so kind of making these declarations or swearing or declaring like oaths of some sort. Jealous in honor. This is describing that the humans, the men at this age, tend to be jealous of the success of others. They're sudden to fight. And then it says seeking the bubble reputation. And so we kind of have to think about a bubble. What does a bubble do? A bubble pops. And so when they're seeking a bubble reputation, it means they're seeking reputation based on things that are not long lasting, that'll pop, right? So maybe they're trying to impress their peers with things that are not built on any kind of long lasting value, right? So they're not getting the respect from their peers for their virtue, for their use of temperance, for their use of fortitude, but more they're getting respect from their peers by doing wild things, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go jump off of this bridge. And everyone's like, whoa, that's so cool. But this is built on something that's fleeting, right? So at this age, there tends to be pursuit of reputation that's not long lasting, even if it's dangerous, right? Even in the cannon's mouth is saying, even if there's danger there. What is the name of the 5th stage? The name of the 5th stage is the justice, which is another word for a judge. So the next stage would be the judge. And so what do we see about the justice? In fair round belly, meaning he tends to put on weight with good capon line. So capon would be this rooster, a dish made of rooster. And so saying that he's eating kind of very nice food, fancy food, luxurious food. His beard is more trimmed. His eyes are more severe, more serious, okay, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so the justice is able to use a lot of sayings or make a lot of comparisons to things that are related, right? To be able to say, well, in this situation, this happened, and so we're going to apply this to this case, Okay. So any of those quotes would be great for the 5th stage. The name of the 6th stage, which he kind of sets up for you, right? The name of the 6th stage is the pantaloon, which I defined for you as an old man. A pantaloon is an old man, and some might even say a foolish old man. So what are quotes that describe this stage? Lean and slippered, meaning he's starting to lose weight, maybe wearing comfortable clothing. With spectacles on nose and pouch on side, so he's starting to wear glasses. His eyesight is probably getting worse. Then it tells us his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank. So meaning the stockings, the pants that he would have worn when he was younger, are now too wide for him because his shank, his legs, have shrunk. So he's again losing weight and his youthful clothes don't fit him anymore. And his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble. So we're seeing that as he gets older, his voice becomes weaker and higher. Pipes and whistles, so you hear kind of like wheezing sounds in the voice as he gets older. Okay. Last scene of all, so what is the name of the 7th stage? The name of the 7th stage would be called second childishness, or you could have said mere oblivion, which mere oblivion means to be the state of being forgotten. Okay. So what is the quote? You would have said sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. So we see at the end, he doesn't have his teeth anymore. He doesn't have his eyes, maybe literally, but probably more referring to having lost eyesight. His sense of taste has gone away, and he kind of has lost everything. So, 5th graders thinking about this, we see kind of this, it's going to be in contrast to the poem that we're going to be reading today. That Shakespeare's essentially saying we come into this world, and I shouldn't say Shakespeare, I should say Shakespeare's character, because often the person speaking in Shakespearean plays, that's important to know. A lot of times he has the fool in his plays stating some of these things. So not necessarily what Shakespeare thinks, but at least what this character is saying. That we come into this world, kind of how we end it, right? When we're born, we don't have teeth, we can't see, we can't really eat a lot, we're totally dependent on others. And then we go through these phases of life and almost come right back to where we are. And in the end, he calls it mere oblivion. We're forgotten, no one remembers us, and we don't have anything to say for ourselves. It's kind of a bleak outlook, right? And I read it in this order because we're going to read a different poem today that has, I would say, a different message. And the goal being this connection of text to self, connecting this poem to ourselves. So there were a few more questions. We had this question about, I guess, 2 more questions. Which of the following is an example of a metaphor? So you should have picked the stars were diamonds in the sky. And then that example of why it's an example of a metaphor, we had set up that answer, right? It's an example of a metaphor because it compares diamonds to stars or stars to diamonds, which is not literally true, right? It's saying stars were diamonds, and that's not a literal statement. And again, it's important to remember the difference between a metaphor and a simile. Similes are going to say like or as, whereas I think of metaphors as like equations, right? Stars equal diamonds. They're saying that they are the same thing and making this figurative statement as if it's literally true, though it's not, okay? Okay, so again, I set this up that this idea of today's poem, we should be contrasting and thinking about how it's different than what we're taking away from All the World's a Stage. And my goal really is for you to find some connection and ultimately, hopefully, some inspiration from our poem today. So we're going to be reading A Psalm of Life, which is by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Sorry, I'm trying to get there in my book. And then I'm going to flip you around and we're going to take a look at the questions for today. Again, our first 5, we know the gig, right? I ask you for the title, which I want to make sure you're formatting correctly with those quotation marks and with capitalization. The poem's author. I've got 2 words I want you to look up. The first one is psalm, which actually doesn't appear in the poem, but it appears in the title. And so I want you to make sure that you know what this poem or what this title means. Okay, the other one is fleeting, and then this question about rhyme scheme. The rest of the questions are kind of linked pretty closely to the poem itself. So what should not be told in mournful numbers? This is one that you could quote the text. So blank should not be told in mournful numbers. And again, a quote would be great here. What is not the goal of life? We'd say blank is not the goal of life. And again, you could quote the text for this one. What was not spoken? Oh, that's not what I meant to say. It should say, what is not our destined end or way? Excuse me. Patience while I figure this out. So, what is not our destined end or way? And again, we could probably quote the poem for this. And then I say this quote is, note this question has two parts. We are to not be like what, or we are to be not like what, but be what? Again, answer both parts of this question. 10 asks, what might the footprints of our lives provide a forlorn and shipwrecked brother? This one you'll want to put in your own words. So again, restating the question. So the footprints of our lives might provide a forlorn or shipwrecked brother, blank. And what is Longfellow calling us to be up and doing? So Longfellow is calling us to be up and doing blank. And you could quote the poem for this one or maybe put it in your own words. The last 4 questions, I'm asking you to identify an example of personification and explain why it's an example of personification. And then simile and explain why it's an example of a simile. And we'll kind of walk through these. And I've said this a bunch of times. This is something that I would expect you to want to be able to do on a test. And so I want to make sure that we are practicing it. Okay, so with that in mind, 5th graders, we are going to read the poem together. So we are on page 36. Following along with me. A Psalm of Life by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. For the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust thou returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow find us farther than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb, driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, howe'er pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime. And departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother seeing, shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. I'm going to tell you all that I love this poem. So I would like you on your own to work on the first work on the first 5 questions. So pause right now, work on those 5, remembering your formatting, remember to restate the question even for our questions about rhyme scheme. Then come on back and we'll get into the rest. I actually tweaked a question a little bit too, so you'll see that when what I said at the beginning of the video is different than what you're going to see in the form. Okay, so 5th graders, so you should have done 1 through 5 already on your own. Looking at number 6. So what should not be told in mournful numbers? So we're looking at blank should not be told in mournful numbers. What does he say? Tell me not in mournful numbers what? What is this blank? Yeah, life is but an empty dream. Should not be told in mournful numbers. And again, think about the poem we just read, right? Shakespeare's saying, oh, the world's a stage. We're all just kind of acting out parts in this play of life. And it's essentially saying, life is all just an act. And Longfellow is saying very much the opposite of this. Don't tell me life is just a dream, right? He says if your soul, right? And the soul referring to the parts of you that make us human, right? That we aren't just like animals. In some ways, we are just like animals, but there are ways that are also ways that distinguish us from animals as well. Um, so he's saying the soul is dead that slumbers. So if you're kind of in a sleepy state and stating that the world doesn't really have much value and life is just an empty dream, he's saying your soul is dead. You need to have that woken up, right? You need to wake up and believe that um, there is value and meaning in life. So then he says, life is real. Life is earnest. So he's saying this is meaningful, right? There's meaning to life. It's a serious endeavor. We're not just here, again, in contrast to what Shakespeare was saying, or at least Shakespeare's speaker was saying. It's not just we're all here just playing parts, right? He's saying that life is real. There's importance to it. There's value to it. And the grave is not its goal. So we can answer number 7 based on what I just read. I'm going to ask you to pause, restate the question, and answer the question. What is not the goal of life, does he tell us? Okay, 5th graders, you should have answered that question. And he kind of goes on with this, dust thou art, to dust thou returnest. This is a biblical reference. Was not spoken of the soul. So he's talking about this idea that our bodies are made of the same particles that make up everything, right? We're all made up of the same thing that makes up dirt, right? These atoms, if we break them down to their most fundamental part. So we kind of come from the earth and we return to the earth. But he's saying that's not really what is spoken about what is different than our bodies, right? We're not just our bodies, he's saying. Okay? So he's talking about this idea that we're not here just counting down the minutes until we die, which again is in contrast to what Shakespeare's speaker was saying, right? We see that he sort of says, and then we all kind of go back to this oblivion and we're totally forgotten and we die the same way we came in. And Longfellow is kind of encouraging us to think, no, this is not what we're here for, just waiting for our death, okay? So number 8, I say, what is our destined end or way? I kind of switched it up from before. So he tells us not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way. So in other words, we're not just here for pleasure and pain, right? We're not just here to experience and feel things. So what are we here for? So we'd say our destined, oops, I'm in the wrong spot. Our destined end or way is what? So it's not enjoyment and not sorrow. That's our destined end or way, but to act. That each tomorrow find us farther than today. So what is our destined end or way? But to act. That each tomorrow find us farther than today. I love this line, 5th graders, this idea that we don't just wake up and become great, right? You don't just say, I'm going to be perfect today. I'm going to be the most fortitudinous person today. I'm going to have the most virtue. No, it's not about that. It's about every day trying to be a little bit more virtuous than you were the day before, a little bit further along than you have before. So what is our destined end? Each day trying to be a little further than we were the day before. Art is long, and I define this. I said, art being in this case, the things of beauty in life, and not necessarily just artwork itself, but anything that is beautiful in life. So art is long and time is fleeting. So essentially these beautiful things can last a long time, right? The art can last a long time, but time does not last. Time is fleeting. It goes away quickly. And our hearts, though stout and brave, still, like muffled drums, are beating funeral marches to the grave. And so he's saying, yeah, we have strong hearts, right? Physically speaking, right? But in spite of that, they are beating funeral marches to the grave, which is to say that to be human is to be dying, right? And truthfully, every day we are a day closer to the day that we're going to die, right? So he's essentially describing that, yes, even though our hearts are strong, they still are kind of marching us towards our end. That is happening to our bodies, okay? But that's not the point, and he gets on to this a little bit. In the world's broad field of battle, he says, in the bivouac of life. And bivouac means a temporary camp. So he's really talking about how we're only here for a little bit of time. So while we're going through the difficulties of life, while we're here just for a short time, he tells us, be not like dumb, driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. This is our answer to question 9, fifth graders. And again, there are 2 parts. We need to answer both parts. And you can quote to do this. So go ahead and pause and answer number 9. So he's telling us for what little time we have here on this earth, don't be like dumb driven cattle who follow wherever they're told to go. They just kind of travel in a herd, follow the pack. They live their day in, day out, eating, producing milk, producing beef, whatever their jobs are, producing fertilizer for the earth, right? He's telling us, don't be like dumb driven cattle. Be heroes. Be a hero. That's what we should strive to be. Trust no future, however pleasant, he says. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present. He's talking about taking advantage of every day. Act with the time you have right now, heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us, he says, we can make our lives sublime. So he's telling us that as we look at these great people, think in your mind right now, who is someone in your life or someone historically who you think of as a great human being? Maybe it was a great politician or leader. Maybe a great religious leader. Maybe a great artist, a great musician. Maybe it's someone very close to you, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a parent, a sibling. And he's telling us that as we think of those people, we don't just think, I'm no Martin Luther King Jr., right? He's great, I'm not. He's telling us the opposite. He's telling us lives of great men remind us we can make our lives sublime, fifth graders. He's telling us that as we think of those great people, we should think that we can also be great, that we can also live lives that are awe-inspiring, that are outstanding, that give other people hope and inspiration. And departing, he says, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. So these lives of great men should tell us we can be great. And by men, he means humans. We can be great. And that when we leave, when we die, we leave behind us footprints in time. These marks, we leave a mark behind us. Footprints, he says, that perhaps another sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother seeing shall take heart again. So 10, what might the footprints of our lives provide for a forlorn or shipwrecked brother? We have to restate this question. So we'd say the footprints of our lives might provide a forlorn or shipwrecked brother. What? Blank. So think about it, right? He says footprints that perhaps another. So footprints that maybe someone else will see, especially as they're sailing over life's solemn main, kind of talking about sailing through life without some enjoyment or happiness. Someone who's miserable, a forlorn, miserable, desperate, shipwrecked brother. And again, shipwrecked meaning kind of doesn't have anything grounding this person. There's no hope, there's no joy, there's no purpose, there's just misery. But maybe someone going through that time of life might see the mark that you left behind and do what? Seeing shall take heart again, which I define for you in our instructions, that to take heart is to be confident, to be brave. So what might your footprints provide? A forlorn or shipwrecked brother might provide inspiration to take heart, maybe, or to have hope, maybe, or to be brave, maybe, right? Possible answers to this question. He's talking about your footprints of your life inspiring somebody else. He says, then let us then be up and doing with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. So what is Longfellow calling us to be up and doing? Longfellow is calling us to be up and doing what? I'm going to let you fill that one in yourselves, fifth graders. Considering, what is it that he's challenging you to? Okay, and I'm going to turn around. I know we're not quite done, but I want to talk a little bit. Again, this relates to this objective of text to self, okay? The takeaways as I think about this poem, the things that stick to me and that I hope stick to you, this idea that we are not being challenged to wake up and be great. He's not saying be a great person right now. He's saying today, try to be a little greater than you were yesterday. And then the next day, try to be a little greater than you were before. I think about that and I think that is a task that I can take on. I can try every day to be a little bit more virtuous, a little more brave, a little more kind, a little more patient, a little more just every day. A little more than the day I was before. And then you know what that equals? That equals this challenge, this reminder that your life can be an inspiration to somebody else. And I think about this, right? I think about this poem, fifth graders, and I think this is the stuff of life. How incredible to be told that you can be something to someone else so that you inspire them. And that's true for anyone. Whether one of you becomes famous and impacts an entire generation, which I believe you could do. But whether or not you do that, the idea that you could inspire the people around you, and I think that all of us can do that, to our siblings, to our future children and grandchildren, to our parents, right, to our friends, that we could be someone who gives inspiration to somebody else. How incredible is that? And so fifth graders, as we're thinking about this poem, I challenge you to hear. Sometimes I know when I'm hearing words that I think are speaking to me, I sometimes feel a little bit of a heartbeat racing. Maybe my breathing speeds up. Maybe I tear up a little bit. And I challenge you, if you're feeling any of those things right now, to lean into them, to know that that is the inspiration speaking to you, to think about what you could do, fifth graders, and that you can be somebody who inspires other people. Your life can be an inspiration. And again, not because you wake up and be inspirational, but because every day you're making the small choices to try to be better and to try to be inspiring. And when it comes down to it, you know, we talk about all kinds of things in school. We're talking about mood and metaphor and simile and personification, all those things, right? And those matter. But when it comes down to it, what matters is this stuff, fifth graders, because you are learning more than any other. Well, I shouldn't say any other because I don't know everyone's life, but I know that all of you are living through some challenging times. And these are the moments. This is why we talk about and practice our virtues, so that when we are called into these moments where there is challenge, that you are ready to try each day to take those challenges on. So you know this is what it's about, and virtues don't happen in a vacuum, right? It's a part of a bigger thing. So I challenge you, fifth graders, to think about yourselves as inspiring, great humans who are going to influence the world, who are going to be an inspiration to other people, okay? Who are going to change this world, because every day you choose to be a little bit better than the way you were the day before. And how incredible a gift that is, to be an inspiration to other people. So, with emotion, and now I'm going to take us, well, that alarm will just pop us right out. It's been the alarm lesson today. We're going to revisit the last 4 questions. But I encourage you in this moment maybe to take a pause and think about what I just talked about before we get into personification and simile. Okay? And I say this, fifth graders, because I am inspired by you and I believe in you and I know that you are going to do great things and I know that you are going to live lives that change other people's lives. That's incredible, fifth graders. That is incredible. So, with that in mind, we have questions 12, 13, 14, and 15. And so 12 is asking us about personification. So remember, when we talk about personification, we're talking about a non-human thing being described as doing a human thing. So first you have to pick which is the following as an example of personification. And then when we're explaining why, we'd say this is an example of personification because it describes blank, which is not human, as doing blank. which is human. Okay, so that's going to be your explanation. So give that a go. And then 14, you're going to pick which one is a simile. And remember, it is an example of a simile because it compares blank to blank using like or as. Okay, so nothing like getting into a little bit of nuts and bolts right after we have your teacher crying about how inspiring you all are. Okay, so you should, fifth graders, have a pretty good idea of how to answer these questions. I've walked you through some of them with exact answers, and some of them you have to kind of take it a step further. But in spite of the homework of it, I really hope you will take a moment and really try and connect to the text meaningfully and personally, and draw some inspiration and draw some, I don't know, take on this challenge that he is giving us all, myself included. Okay? All right. Thank you, fifth graders.